I returned home 3 days earlier than scheduled. The project in Tulsa finished faster than expected. The foundation inspections went successfully, all the permits were signed, and by Thursday the work was completely finished. My boss suggested I take some extra days off. At first, I thought about staying there, going to a bar, or watching a game. But I hadn't seen Zara in 2 weeks, and I missed her very much. I took the last flight and landed around 10 p.m. I didn't tell her because I wanted to surprise her. At the 24-hour store near our house, I bought flowers, ordinary ones, in plastic wrap. Zara always said she liked them more than expensive bouquets because they seemed more real. I remember thinking about this on the drive. She always claimed she valued sincerity. I parked in our usual spot on the 3rd floor of the garage. I went up to the apartment where we had lived for the last year and a half and where we were planning our wedding. The date was set for the following April. The hall was booked and the invitations had already been designed. I quietly opened the door with my key so as not to scare her. The living room was dark, the TV was off, the laptop was closed. I figured she had gone to bed early, since in her last message she complained about being tired. Then I heard laughter from the bedroom. It wasn't only her voice. I froze in the hallway with the flowers in my hands and the bag on my shoulder. For a moment, I wanted to believe I was mistaken. Maybe she was watching a video on her phone, or a friend had come over. But I knew that second voice too well. It was my brother, Knox. I stood there for about 10 seconds, not moving and barely breathing. Then I walked to the door and pushed it open. Zara was on top of him. In my bed, on the sheets we had chosen together at the home goods store. They both froze. Zara's face went pale. Knox tried to pull up the blanket and say something. I looked at them and saw the details. Zara's necklace, which I had given her for our first anniversary, was lying on the nightstand. Knox's shirt was on the floor on my side of the bed. Wine glasses were on the dresser. They had made themselves at home. This was far from the first time. Inside me, something just turned off. There was no rage or pain, only a cold realization. The person I knew no longer exists. Zara started crying and calling my name, but I just raised my hand, signaling for silence. Knox tried to explain himself, calling me his brother, my younger brother, whom I had helped with his first job, and for whom I had vouched when he had bad credit history. The same one who 2 months ago had asked me for advice about a girl he had started seeing. Now I understood who he had been talking about. I walked to the basket by the door and threw the flowers away. I started packing my things. Zara was saying something through tears, trying to touch me, but I walked around her like a piece of furniture. I took my laptop, chargers, documents from the safe, my passport, birth certificate, insurance. I took some clothes and toiletries. Knox, pulling on his pants, tried to block my way to the exit. He begged me to talk to him. I looked at him and said only one word, "Don't you dare." He stepped back. The packing took 15 minutes. Everything else, the furniture, the kitchenware, the wedding preparations, no longer mattered. As I was leaving, Zara grabbed my arm, but I gently removed her hand. I couldn't look at her face. I drove to a nearby motel off the highway. I sat on the bed in the room, unable to cry or feel angry. Around midnight, my phone started blowing up with calls and messages. I turned off the sound and just watched the notifications pile up. By 3 in the morning, still unable to sleep, I opened my phone and started making a list. It wasn't a list of feelings. She said that Knox had told her everything, that he was suffering terribly and had made a terrible mistake. She went on about family forgiveness, about how complicated things are, and how anyone can stumble. Mom invited me to a family dinner on Sunday, sure that we could work everything out. I said I would think about it and hung up. I wasn't going to go. My sister Vera sent a message of condolences. She was the only sincere one in this family, but she always played the peacemaker, trying to keep everyone together. I replied that I needed time and asked her to keep me updated on family matters. 2 weeks later, I was already in Dallas. The transfer was arranged quickly. I had been planning this career move for a long time, and my regional director helped set everything up in 3 days. The new apartment on the 8th floor in the city center was more expensive than the previous one, but now I didn't need to share rent or save for a wedding. I bought minimalist furniture that reminded me of... In the photo, Knox was hugging Zara, and she was still wearing the same necklace that I had bought. I stared at the picture for a long time, then closed it without replying. Instead, I called Greg Whitmore, a development consultant I had worked with on the Riverside project. He mentioned that Knox was trying to propose a partnership to him. I asked Greg if they had signed the papers. Finding out they hadn't, I suggested we discuss other cooperation options next week. After hanging up, I opened my spreadsheet and checked off the first item. The process of detachment had begun. 6 months flew by unnoticed. Dallas became my home. In April, I was promoted to senior project manager. The director noted that after the move, I had started working on a completely different level. It was true. I had freed up a lot of energy that had previously been consumed by rotten relationships. I started going on dates with a girl named Bianca. We would occasionally go out for a drink. It was easy and commitment-free. Every 2 weeks, Vera would give me news. Knox had proposed to Zara. They were planning a spring wedding. Our parents threw them an engagement party. Everyone around kept saying what a strong couple they were. Vera apologized for sharing such difficult news, but I always answered the same way. Thank you for keeping me updated. Vera didn't even realize that each of her messages was giving me exactly the information I needed. The timeline of events, the development of the situation, the confirmation that they had finally come to believe their own story. In this narrative, I was the source of all the troubles, and they were the unfortunate victims who had found love against all odds. Perfect. I began implementing my plan. Zara's biggest client, Meridian Creative, had been working with her for almost 2 years. I had personally introduced her to the CEO, Troy Hutchins, during our engagement. Troy was my college buddy from Georgia Tech, a great guy. We kept in touch. In May, I dialed his number. Troy, how's the Meridian brand refresh going? Everything's fine. Zara does quality work. Why? Just checking. Listen, have you met Jenna Pascal yet? She's a designer who just moved from Austin. Amazing portfolio. Her specialty is tech branding. Interesting. Send me her info. I sent a letter of recommendation and let them work it out. 2 weeks later, Vera casually mentioned that Zara had lost a big client and was very upset about it. I made no comment. Knox's commercial real estate business was riding the wave of success from the Riverside development deal, the one I had set up. He presented himself as a specialist, capable of connecting investors with engineering firms, using my network of contacts as a guarantee of reliability. I began redirecting those connections. I called 3 firms that Knox was trying to build relationships with. I offered them better terms, lower margin projects, faster timelines, and reduced risks. No lengthy persuasion was needed. Behind me stood a reputation. Behind Knox, only empty words. One by one, they chose other partners. In June, Vera wrote, Knox has been on edge lately. Several important contracts fell through. He's working himself to the bone, trying to save the situation. My reply was brief. That's unfortunate. Vera added, yes, he and Zara even argued about it over dinner. She thinks he's losing control in stressful situations. I hope they manage, I replied. The financial part required surgical precision. For 3 years, I had paid for my parents' elite country club membership through corporate accounts, writing it off as client entertainment expenses. A bit of creative accounting, but within the law. I did it because Mom loved that place, and Dad's consulting income was very unstable. In July, I stopped the payments. I simply didn't make the next quarterly payment. The leased cars were co-signed by me, but the renewal term expired in August. I contacted the dealership and demanded my name be removed from all documents. Everything was done officially and cleanly. Now they would have to prove their creditworthiness on their own. The home equity line of credit, with a limit of $75,000, was backed by proof of my income. My lawyer prepared the guarantee revocation papers. I notified them 90 days in advance, strictly according to protocol. At first, no one noticed anything. Such changes don't take effect immediately, but the blow was inevitable. In August, Vera said Mom had received a strange letter from the club about a missed payment. She was confused, as she thought everything was automatic. I replied, strange. In September, Knox lost another deal. He came to a family dinner completely exhausted. Zara ignored him the entire evening. In October, Dad's investment project fell through. There were financing problems. He looked very dejected. I read every message, acknowledged receipt, but didn't reveal my hand. 2 weeks ago, a call came. Mom's number. I hesitated, but still answered. Ashton? Her voice sounded different. No sobbing, just endless fatigue. Son, we need to talk. I'm listening. We want to have a family dinner, a reunion. It's been almost a year, dear. The family can't be whole without you. I paused. We miss you, she continued. All of us. Please come. There was some shuffling, then Knox's voice came on the line. Ash. His voice was hoarse and strained. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I did something despicable, but we're brothers. Please, let's just meet face to face. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the lights of Dallas. Desperation was evident in their tones. After a long silence, I asked, when? Mom exhaled with relief. 2 Saturdays from now, at our place, at 6 p.m. Okay, I'll come. Oh, sweetie, thank you. Thank you so much. See you then. I hung up. The phone immediately vibrated. Vera, did they call? Are you really going? Yes, it's time. Vera, time for what? I glanced at my reflection, smiled faintly, and didn't write anything back. Instead, I opened my calendar, marked the appropriate Saturday, and bought a ticket. Then I reviewed my calculations one last time. The mechanism had been set in motion. Deals had gone to others. Clients had switched contractors. The financial support had stopped. They hadn't realized it yet. This evening had nothing to do with reconciliation. I wanted them to finally understand what they had lost. I closed my laptop. 2 weeks later, I flew in on Friday evening. I rented a car and drove to a motel off the highway, a standard business travel establishment with generic rooms and breakfasts. I didn't tell anyone about my early arrival. I didn't drive past the old apartment. I just checked in, unpacked, and slept. I slept peacefully. On Saturday morning, I went to the hotel gym. An hour of training, a shower, a haircut at the salon across the street. I put on dark jeans and a shirt. Nothing flashy, but I looked impeccable and confident. Before leaving, I looked in the mirror. Complete absence of emotion. That was a good sign. I pulled up to my parents' house at exactly 5:55 p.m. I parked behind Vera's SUV and Knox's pickup truck. I sat in the car, checked my email one last time. Nothing important. I got out and walked to the front door. The door swung open before I could touch the bell. Mom. She looked older, not drastically, but rather worn out. Her smile was strained and too hasty. Ashton! Oh, sweetie, you came. She tried to hug me. I allowed it, but didn't hug back. I just stood still until she pulled away. Come in, quickly. Everyone's already here. Inside, it still smelled the same. Stewed meat and vanilla. I walked into the dining room. Dad stood up from his seat at the head of the table and extended his hand. I gave him a firm, businesslike handshake. Father. Vera was there with her husband, Tommy. She waved at me shyly. Uncertainty was in her eyes. Knox and Zara sat side by side, shoulder to shoulder. Knox forced a semblance of a smile, but his gaze remained hunted. Zara didn't look up. I took my usual place at the end of the table. What would you like to drink? Mom was already fussing in the kitchen. Wine? Beer? There's water. Water is fine. She brought a glass. Her hands were visibly shaking. Everyone took their seats. The silence was heavy. Dad cleared his throat. Well, I'm glad we're all together. Yes, Knox agreed too quickly. Too much time has passed. I sipped my water, remaining silent. Mom started serving food. Roast, mashed potatoes, beans, my favorite dishes. The attempt at manipulation was obvious, but I appreciated the effort. We ate. Small talk ensued. Vera asked about work. I answered monosyllabically. Tommy talked about baseball. Dad told an unfunny joke. Knox kept glancing at me, as if waiting for an explosion. Zara just pushed food around her plate. I behaved calmly, like at a regular business dinner. After 20 minutes, Dad put down his utensils. All right, I think we need to discuss why we're here. I raised my head and waited. Son, we invited you to clear the air, to move forward. We are one family after all. Okay, I said. Mom immediately chimed in. We understand how much pain you were in. But sweetie, family is sacred. People make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. But what matters is the ability to heal. She was already crying. What happened between Knox and Zara wasn't malicious. They didn't want to hurt you, but they found true feelings. And as hard as that is, we have to accept it. Zara was sobbing silently. Knox leaned forward. Ash, forgive me. I regret it every single day. What I did was horrible, I know. But I've grown. I've realized a lot. I miss my brother. His voice cracked. I haven't earned your favor, he continued. But we're family. That has to mean something. Zara finally spoke. Her voice was quiet and broken. "I never wanted to hurt you, Ashton. I hope you know that. And I believe that someday you'll be happy for us." They all froze, waiting for my reaction. Tears, rage, or forgiveness, something that would allow them to forget what had happened. I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of water. "Are you finished?" My tone was completely calm. Dad was confused. "Ashton, we're trying." "No." I set the glass down on the table. "You're not trying at all. You're putting on a performance. You've already written the ending of this story. For you, I'm just a formality, necessary to close the deal." The room went very quiet. Mom tried to say something, but I didn't let her. "You invited me for your own peace of mind, to get rid of your guilt and move on with a clear conscience." Knox shifted. "That's not true." "It is true. For a whole year, you've been rewriting reality. Knox and Zara fell in love. I turned out to be incapable of forgiveness. The family went its own way. I became the guilty one, simply for leaving." I stood up, calmly, without unnecessary movements. "Now listen to how things really are. I will speak, you will listen, and then I will leave, and you will realize the scale of your loss." Knox tried to get up. "Ash, listen." My gaze made him freeze, cold and hard. "Sit down." He obeyed. Everyone in the room was paralyzed. Even Dad didn't move. I looked around at them, paused, and began. "Knox." He raised his head, trying not to look away. "Remember the Riverside Development Project, the one that launched your business?" He nodded slowly. "It happened because my company was handling the infrastructure. I connected you with the project manager. I vouched for you when you had no experience." "I know, and I've always appreciated that." "The partnership with Hastings, the Northgate Plaza project, the financing for your practice." His face began to pale. "All of that was possible only because of my connections, my contacts, and my recommendations." I turned my gaze to Zara. She wouldn't look up from her plate. "Zara, Meridian Creative, your biggest client for the last 2 years, the one that let you pay for your apartment." She looked up with tear-stained eyes. "I directed you to them. Troy Hutchins is my old friend from college. I convinced him that you were talented and could be relied upon." Her lips trembled. "Silverton Tech, Cascade Brands, Palmer and Partners, 3 of your 5 biggest contracts. All of those people came to you through me." I looked at my parents. Mom wasn't smiling anymore. "Mom, Dad, your country club membership, which you used for 3 years." Dad tensed. "I paid for it from my corporate account, $8,000 a year. Not exactly standard accounting, but it worked." Mom covered her mouth in horror. "The lease on both cars is in my name and backed by my credit history. Dad, Ashton, we never asked you to do that. The home equity line of credit had a limit of $75,000. It was approved only because my income served as collateral." Dead silence filled the room. Vera stared at me intently, while Tommy looked utterly lost. Knox was the first to find his voice. He said they were grateful for my help and had always appreciated it. But I wasn't finished. I continued standing, calm and precise with every word. 6 months ago, I began systematically disentangling myself from all our shared affairs. Knox's face changed. I explained the Meridian Creative situation. I had introduced Troy to another designer, Jenna Pascal. "Your contracts are already being transferred to her, and the process will be complete next month." Zara's eyes widened in terror. "As for Riverside Development's parent company, I redirected our partnership to Kellerman Group. They are Knox's direct competitors." Knox jumped up, but I continued. "The Hastings commercial projects, Northgate Plaza, and 3 other properties you were counting on will no longer be under your management. I transferred them to other partners." My brother's face turned crimson. The country club had been calling about a debt because I had stopped paying their bills 4 months ago. "The car leases expire next month, and my name is no longer on the documents. Now you'll have to prove your creditworthiness yourselves." Mom was crying, this time genuinely. I mentioned the home equity line of credit. My lawyer filed the revocation papers back in August. The 90-day notice has already taken effect. It's over. Dad slammed his hand on the table, calling my actions vengeful. He shouted that I was punishing the whole family. "But for what, Dad? For not wanting to tolerate my brother sleeping with my fiancée? For you and Mom choosing family peace over justice and accountability, you acted like it didn't matter. Dad raised his voice, claiming they had given me time and space. He asked what more I wanted. I looked at him with a cold stare. Nothing. I don't need anything else from you. That's the point. Knox paced the room in a panic. He started talking about contracts and letters of intent, but they were all based on a partnership that no longer existed. I advised him to read the fine print more carefully. Zara was trembling, insisting that Meridian couldn't just drop her. But I had reviewed their contracts. They were at-will agreements with termination possible at any time, and she was already being transitioned out of the team. Dad pointed a finger at me, reminding me that we are family and that we have something in common. Common what? Expenses? I covered all the costs and created all the opportunities, while you only took and took, never once asking what it cost me. Mom sobbed into her hands, repeating that they hadn't known the extent of my help. Exactly. You didn't know because you never asked. You just believed this foundation would stand forever. Knox approached the table, despair in his eyes. He begged me, because those projects were his only source of income, just as Zara's contracts were hers. I replied that he should have thought of that earlier, before deciding that my fiancée was worth losing a brother. He grabbed my arm, trying to stop me. I looked at his fingers, then at his face, and quietly told him to let go of me. He obeyed and stepped back. I smoothed my sleeve. You all made your choice. Knox chose her, and our parents chose silence over the truth. I'm simply respecting those decisions. Dad shouted that this was madness, cruelty, revenge. I looked at Knox and Zara. You wanted to build a life together? Congratulations. Build it, but not on my foundation. I turned toward the door. Chaos erupted in the room. Knox shouted insults. Dad insisted my behavior was unacceptable and spoke of family obligations. Mom begged me to stay and talk. Zara sobbed. Vera sat motionless and silent. Tommy looked like he wanted to disappear. At the exit, I stopped without turning around. I'm not doing this out of hatred. I'm doing it because you made it painfully clear to me. I am replaceable. Now you will find out what happens when I am truly not there. Knox's voice broke. He reminded me that we are brothers. No, we were brothers. Now you're just a man who slept with my fiancée in my bed and decided I would swallow it. I walked out of the house and got into my car. Through the window, I could see them. Knox was pacing, clutching his head. Dad was shouting and pointing. Mom was crying at the table. Zara stood utterly crushed. Only Vera was looking at me through the glass. There was no anger in her eyes, only sadness and understanding. I started the engine. My phone immediately lit up with incoming messages. Knox wrote that I would regret this. Mom asked me to come back. Dad insisted the conversation wasn't over. I put the phone on silent, tossed it in the cup holder, and pulled out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I could see the lit-up house and the silhouettes moving behind the windows, the chaos I had left behind. I drove onto the main road, rolled down the windows, and turned up the music. I was heading to the airport to return to Dallas, to my life, in which there was no longer a place for them. 3 months later, I was promoted to regional director. I became the youngest employee to hold that position in company history. The announcement was made at the quarterly meeting. My boss gave a speech about leadership, vision, and results. People applauded. I shook hands, and then I simply went back to my office and continued working. My life was truly good. I began seeing Bianca regularly. Our relationship was comfortable and calm. She was perceptive, driven, and didn't ask anything of me except who I truly was. We had dinner twice a week, went to the movies, and didn't complicate life. Dallas felt like the right place. Its skyline, its movement, even the heat, it all belonged to me now. Vera continued to write every 2 weeks. Her messages came like clockwork, full of apologies and internal contradictions. She still went to family dinners, trying to hold together what had long since crumbled to dust. She wrote that Knox's business was in decline. 2 more deals had fallen through this month, and he'd had to lay off his assistant. Zara had taken a full-time job at a small design firm and looked completely exhausted. Our parents were selling the house, calling it a retirement move, although Vera had overheard them arguing about money. Family gatherings had become tense, and everyone constantly asked about me. I read every message, but I replied briefly, limiting myself to thanking her for the news or simply acknowledging receipt. I didn't ask questions or engage in dialogue. In April, Vera reported a huge fight between Knox and Zara. She blamed him for ruining everything. He claimed she had sabotaged their future. Mom took her son's side. Dad just stayed silent. A week later, Zara snapped at Mom, telling her everything about this family's toxic habits. They were still together, but constantly fighting over lack of money and who to blame. Reading this, I felt neither satisfaction nor triumph, only distance. They had become strangers to me, just people from my past. In June, things changed. Vera wrote that their social circle had begun to thin out. Our parents' acquaintances were polite but distant. At a charity event, Vera was asked where I had disappeared to. Her answer about my work-related move was met with skepticism. Knox tried to discuss a project with Greg Whitmore, but Greg had completely cut off contact. My brother came home in a rage. Dad's investment project, on which he had pinned great hopes, failed. It turned out that it had been tied to my business network, and Dad only learned this after everything collapsed. The invisible supports of their well-being were finally gone. Now they were standing on empty ground. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from Knox asking me to read it. I stared at the screen for a long time before opening the message. He wrote that he knew I didn't want to reply, and that he didn't deserve forgiveness. Knox admitted that he had destroyed everything. His business was barely surviving. His relationship with Zara was falling apart. She blamed him for losing clients. He blamed himself for losing his brother. He saw how hard it was for our parents, despite their attempts to hide their financial troubles. The sale of the house, the stress, the collapse of the family, he admitted it was all his fault. He wasn't expecting forgiveness. He was just asking for help, saying he was drowning. I read the letter once. I hovered the cursor over the reply button, hesitated for 10 seconds, then simply closed the tab and archived the message. I blocked his address and deleted the notification. That evening at dinner, Bianca asked about my family. We were sitting in an Italian restaurant downtown. She was telling me about a civil rights case she had won, a big victory, and I was genuinely happy for her. She noticed that I never talk about my relatives and asked if we were close. I thought about the answer. Once, a long time ago, yes, but not now. What happened? They chose a side at a critical moment, and I chose myself. Bianca nodded, not pressing, and that was exactly what I liked about her. She asked if I regretted cutting ties. I took a sip of wine and considered the question honestly. No, I only regret trusting people who didn't deserve it and not seeing their true nature sooner. But leaving? That saved me. She suggested that they might try to reconnect again. Probably, they will. But I'm not the person they remember anymore. That guy who carried everything on his shoulders while everyone else just took advantage of him. He no longer exists. Bianca laughed and said that guy must have been very tired. And I laughed too. Yesterday, Vera sent a photo. Another family dinner, but at a small table in a different house. Knox and Zara sat across from each other, not next to each other. Mom looked aged. Dad looked bitter. The caption read, "This is what we are now." I looked at their faces for a long time. Knox looked exhausted and defeated. Zara looked trapped. Mom looked deeply unhappy, and Dad was full of bile. And Vera, ever neutral Vera, looked completely drained from trying to maintain this semblance of a family. I archived the message. Today, I am standing on my balcony. The city lights stretch to the horizon. Music plays in the apartment. Somewhere inside, Bianca is reviewing her legal cases. My phone vibrates. Vera, again. She writes that Knox is desperate and is asking her again to contact me. She asks if she should tell him no. I type back, "Tell him whatever you want. It doesn't matter." She doesn't write back. I put down my phone and look at Dallas. My city, my life, my rules. Somewhere out there, in that old town, they are sitting around a table still trying to understand why everything fell apart. They keep arguing about who is to blame and trying to hold on to what I let go of long ago. Knox is probably checking his phone, waiting for an answer that will never come. Zara is surely regretting every step that brought her here. Mom is crying over her broken family, and Dad is angry, calling me vengeful, refusing to acknowledge his own role in what happened. And Vera sits between them, dreaming of a return to how things used to be, but unwilling to choose a side. They thought they could replace me, build their happiness on the foundation I had laid, and pretend I didn't matter. They were wrong. I finish my drink. Bianca calls to me from the other room, asking if I'm coming back. Yes, in a second. I take one last look at the night city. I remember that night when I walked into the apartment and saw the betrayal, when something inside me flicked off like a switch. I don't regret the silence. I don't regret the cold calculation. Not any of it. They wanted family unity? They got it. Only now there is no place in it for me. I walk inside and close the door behind me. The person they betrayed is gone forever, and the one who left is exactly where he should be, free, whole, and unreachable. And I will never look back.